One of the more dominating runs in the history of this tournament.
Well, the reigning champions, after that dominant run through the tournament, returned just 2 starters, but came into the season ranked number 3. They went 10-1 in the non-conference, the loss coming at a full-strength Kansas team. UConn then went 18-2 in Big East play. They had 14 straight wins at one stretch. They were the Big East regular season champions, their first outright conference champion this century. And then they won the Big East tournament title, first time since 2011. I know they wandered in the wilderness of the American, at least from their perspective, for a few years, but that's a little surprising too. But instead, Dan Hurley and the Huskies, as he said after beating Marquette and winning, best program in the country all year, and they get the #1 overall seed. Pleased to be joined by the head coach of the Huskies now. Dan, we've talked a little bit. It appears to us that you've drawn the toughest road, yet we've also opined that you guys probably don't care. How would you assess that?
Yeah, hey, listen, I think it's tough no matter where you are. I mean, it's there's so much depth in college basketball. These days, I think more so than playing all of the excellent teams. I mean, San Diego State, Florida Atlantic. 2 teams that were in the Final Four with us last year that have returned a lot to their programs. Auburn, who ran through the SEC tournament, and then Iowa State, who's playing as good as anybody in the country. This time of year comes down to who plays the best of their identity, and then obviously are the matchups favorable.
Dan, what did you learn about your team since that Creighton game in terms of how they've responded since that point?
Yeah, just the characters there, and then the ability to learn from failure. To really understand what our true identity needs to be. We become vulnerable just like everybody else. When we get away from our formula. We're one of the best offensive teams in the country. I think we've risen to #1 in terms of efficiency there. We play elite defense. Especially with Klingon in there, maybe we're one of the top defensive teams in the country. We rebound the heck out of the ball. We show up with a relentlessness in terms of how hard we play, like we've never won anything. So, when we stick to those principles, and we got away from them when we went to Creighton, but we learned from it, and we got right back on our game.
Danny, you mentioned elite defense, and I think I was at your practice, one of your practices in Seattle before you played Gonzaga, and you had your team together, and you talked about the fact that you were an elite offensive team, but your defense wasn't yet elite. What has changed since Seattle and now that you call yourself an elite defensive team?
Yeah, I think that the two guys got healthy and then got on the court with this team. Steph Castle, who at 6'6", it's got the physical strength, the athleticism, to potentially shut down the other team's best perimeter guy. So we've got a perimeter stopper, and then we have a 7'2" center that protects the rim and has a defensive impact, unlike any other player in the country in terms of what he does there. So some of it was our 2 best defenders weren't healthy and together on the court. And I think obviously the defensive end, there's a lot of principles you got to understand and know what spots to be in.
A lot of people on TV or fans talk about how does UConn become back-to-back champions, and they kind of use that terminology. What terminology do you use to describe this particular race for this year's team, which is, we know here, is very different than last year's team?
Yeah, I think for us, Jay, we just were so locked in. We've got just a great group of just like-minded, super competitive, players and coaches that are just all about winning and preparing at an elite level. We've got just a great group of players that value winning above all things, and we understand that we had the best season up to this point in college basketball. We had a pretty clean sheet in terms of non-conference regular season, and then we performed at a high level at MSG. We can't use that for any advantage starting on Friday with Stetson. We're going to show up in that arena in Brooklyn like a completely desperate team, but with the confidence of champions.
Dan, I promised Billis that I wouldn't ask any questions about any undergarments. There'll be plenty of time for any superstition questions and all of that stuff. But I do have one really important question that really calls into question how well you've scouted Stetson. Are you aware that a good portion of the movie The Waterboy was filmed on their campus? Were you aware of that?
Oh, man. I thought that was in Louisiana.
Well, it was based in Louisiana, but filmed in Stetson, which is in Florida. Some of it.
Oh, I get it. All right, see, I get the accent. Bobby
Boucher.
Bobby Boucher.
Bobby Boucher. All right.
All right.
Yeah, you don't want to get my superstitions, man. It's gotten wild, man. Jay saw it. Jay saw it. Steph knows. Jay, I mean, it's crazy, man.
Dan, wish you luck, man. Congratulations on a terrific season, and we look forward to talking with you throughout the tournament.
Good luck, Dan.
Let's go get some float tank time now, Dan. Big tournament
My
coming. Well, St. Patrick's Day. Why wouldn't you have the
Just
clover
get
right
the
there,
timer
Jack?
right on the float tank, man.
This got me out of the first round last year. This happened.
That is Dan Hurley of the reigning national champions and also the #1 overall seed in this year's tournament. We appreciate him being with us. Back to pick some upsets.